So, with Assassin's Creed Mirage slated to release later this year, with promises of righting the sinking ship of what was once Ubisoft's flagship titles, I decided to go back and look at the series as a whole, or at least most of it, and see if I can remind us all what made the game so special, along with trying to pinpoint where the series went wrong. The plan is simple: play all the mainline titles, not including Rogue or spin-offs like Chronicles, up until Origins, and give each of them the individual time they are due before coming to a collective consensus in one longer video at the end, hopefully finishing before Mirage releases. Naturally, this means I started by recording Revelations because I'm bad at numbers, but not to fear, I fixed my dumb and will be starting right where Ubisoft Montreal did in the very first Assassin's Creed. This game is old enough to drive, so there will be no restraint on spoilers going forward. You ready? I hope so. I was pleasantly surprised by the first Assassin's Creed when over the course of the game, I found myself becoming deeply interested in its narrative and the themes surrounding it. It's been so long since a Ubisoft studio told an interesting story that I'd honestly forgotten they could do it, but I was so engrossed in the level of nuance present in the title, with a plot willing to have just about every important character floating somewhere between the black and white that is the perceived moral compass, finding more and more gray the farther you get, only to come to, well, your own conclusions. Questions involving morality, religion, and a person's ability to grow are all touched upon in a rather short period of time, as Altair becomes a far more interesting character before your eyes while the hours pass by. This may change when I replay the other games following the original, but by the end I found myself far more interested in Altair than I did in Ezio. Ezio's story is fantastic because we watch a boy become a man in a hard world where he has to fight against the things he could have never even imagined. But Altair is special because you're there to witness a man who thought himself the master of the world around him become humble, wise, and respected by the end, all while remaining deeply flawed. Let's roll it back a bit and recap the story itself. We open with Altair and two other assassins, brothers actually, on a mission to recover a Templar artifact from a tomb under Jerusalem in possession of the head Templar himself, Robert de Sable. The mission will go poorly as an arrogant Altair will spit in the face of the tenets of his creed, taking the life of an innocent, along with compromising the Brotherhood when rather than discreetly carrying out his mission, he tries to kill Robert. It's a bad scene and only gets worse when he returns to the assassin's home in Masyaf to report his failure and the death of his fellow assassins, only for Malik to come in badly injured and with the Templar prize in hand. There isn't time, however, as the Templars followed them back and lay siege to the village, causing us to leap into action. Your skills will help the assassins win the day, but your misdeeds that led to the battle in the first place were not so quickly forgotten, as Al-Mualim will stab you, although not kill you, and he will strip you of all rank, essentially making you a novice again. You'll go through a training mission of sorts to the village to find a betrayer in the midst, which, when successful, will reward you with a basic sword and a new mission. The leader of the assassins, Al-Mualim, will tell you that there are a list of 9 targets that must be hunted down and killed, giving you the name of the first in Damas. This list will become the majority of the game from here on until the end, and to be honest, the content outside the narrative doesn't change much throughout the game, so I'd like to take this moment to cover the first target along with other gameplay quirks before we roll into a mostly narrative-focused ending. First things first, you'll be forced to ride the long, slow, boring ride to Damas, along with the other cities you'll visit, and I genuinely hate it. There's viewpoints and flags scattered around to be found throughout the open area that is the kingdom, but it really isn't much to talk about. After you've visited each city once, you'll get the option to skip the journey to them, and I highly recommend that you do so. Anyway, getting to a city will provide the first small problem to solve on how do you get in. Well, it's not very exciting, but each city has a scholar outside you'll have to save from soldiers that will allow you to blend with his friends as a way into the city. This is boring by the second time you do it. Anyway, the first thing you're likely to do when you get into a city is scale the nearest viewpoint to get your bearings on the local area and locate the Assassin's Bureau you'll be visiting to plan your missions. I really like this because it encourages you to start in each city by learning a little bit about them, but on return you'll feel as though you already have enough of your bearings, only needing to learn about new districts that open up in between chapters. Stop inside said bureau and be greeted by one of 3 different personalities you'll be dealing with in the happy one, the neutral one, and Malik, whose brother you got killed and then told him to stop whining about it. Can you guess what his personality is like? They seem generic up front, but we'll discuss them more in depth a bit later. The bureau leader will give you 3 areas of interest to search out and send you to gather information about your target. You only have to do half of the investigations, and you'll often find out half of the information less than helpful, but you never know who's got the good stuff, and that will help you during the mission, so you're encouraged to do all of them. Now, I use the word encouraged lightly because some of these investigations get downright infuriating. The late game Archer eliminations especially. These dudes go from legally deaf to fucking Terrence Fletcher listening for an out-of-tune instrument in the studio band.
Like, get the fuck out of my sight before I demolish you.
The second you start one of these missions. Also, when you get the Informer missions asking you to carry out assassinations on ground level targets, you can get caught just for fucking walking for what often feels like no reason, leading to agonizing fail states, making you do everything over again.
Oh, come on!
Pickpocketing has similar frustrations when forgetting to have your target locked before pressing B will cause you to just gently rub him rather than rob him. Speaking of targeting, I'm willing to forgive a bit of jank considering this is the first iteration of a very big system that did get better over time, but sometimes the game interprets your inputs in just baffling ways. No game, I wanted to kill the enemy I'm looking at, not this poor woman who just happened to be in our radius. When I pushed up, left, and A, I really wanted to jump up and to the left in a side eject, not back eject myself into the ground of incredible hardness, and for fuck's sake game, Altair can't swim. Can we just assume I was aiming for the pillar of life, not the waters of death? Is that too much for you to fucking comprehend? For as much good as the combat provides with things like stepping in to break the guard of an opponent and actually having the game check you if you get too bold, there's an equal amount of frustration that tells you to play it safe rather than to be bold and exciting. I don't hate the gameplay here found by any means, and there is a lot to love in that it's really the only game in the series to make flight as an exciting and necessary an option in the game as to fight. Feeling fast as your enemies fail to match your pace is awesome, and I appreciate that. I just wish in my moment of peril, I felt confident enough to be a little bit braver with my route up a building. For the most part though, that's your gameplay. Climb towers to spot opportunities, pickpocket one guy over here, then eavesdrop on some dudes vibing over there, pop by your informers to get some information out of them by getting some stealth kills on archers up on the rooftop, or tanks walking down alone in the streets. Maybe run around collecting flags that they somehow lost, I guess? Or maybe just run along the rooftops to get your guy with your info. Rounding out your info gathering abilities will be louder missions like using guards as throwables to destroy the stands of corrupt merchants, escorting one of your brothers out of the city while they're compromised and in need of escape, or follow a dude around until he's in a dark enough alley to beat him in. I must admit, I often feel bad at the end of interrogations when Altair just shanks a guy, but I guess it is what it is. You'll complete these tasks to gather information on your targets from guard placements, escape routes, tendencies, and when they'll be most vulnerable. These sometimes matter more than others, but at the end of the day, your target's life fading away in your arms is the goal, and there's no wrong way to do it. With enough knowledge gained, you'll head back into the bureau to collect your marker to signify the deed has been done, and you'll be given permission to move on your target. Alright, with that out of the way, we can talk about our 9 targets and Altair's growing understanding as it goes on. I should state that while I knew going in that I was hunting Templars, at this point Altair didn't, as he was simply killing the targets Al-Mualim presented him and he had no knowledge of what connected the men. The first is Tamir, the arms dealer in Damas. He feeds us our first seeds of doubt, but it's so early that we're likely to write it off as a bad guy who thinks he's above his own evils. He will let a thought breach your mind though, as he comments that of all those who deal in war, why was he the one targeted, stating that he's just a piece of the puzzle, and that you'll have to unravel it for yourself. All of these conversations read differently when you know how it ends, and that's what impressed me. I'd read this book before and I was still excited to see how it ended, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Tamir leaves us with a word of warning that our pride will destroy us, and at the time, I believe he was right. Altair has many faults, but the one thing that he isn't is stupid. He will begin asking questions as soon as your second target in Dr. Garner, who is one of the most memorable in the game to me. Over the course of your investigation, you'll hear whispers of his cruelty throughout the city, but seeing it firsthand is another thing entirely. The sheer fear on the face of an escaping patient, and I use that word lightly, is enough to make you squirm, but then you get something you don't expect. He has the appearance of an evil doctor to be sure, but he speaks and acts like he genuinely cares about those in his stead, although that kindness is fleeting as he's quick to switch from the carrot to the stick, even going so far as to have the legs of the would-be escapee broken to prevent him from flight. If you follow him as he visits different patients, you'll find as many who fear for their lives as those who thank him for helping them. It makes you wonder if whatever he's doing really does have a light at the end of the tunnel. Maybe the ends do justify the means. And then as you hear his last words, they will be of the people in his hospital, seemingly genuinely worried about what will happen to them. Another shade of gray to what seemed like such a simple investigation. This will bother Altair, even bringing it back up at the bureau, but that's quickly shut down and he appears to let it go, at least for the time being. Your next target will be the slaver Talal, who, again, I thought to be a simple scumbag, but he makes an interesting point that I have a hard time getting around.
Beggars, whores, addicts, lepers. Do they strike you as proper slaves? Unfit for even the most menial tasks? No. I took them not to sell, but to save. And yet you'd kill us all. For no other reason than it was asked of you.
He makes an interesting point. And while my internal logic is to say you're taking the ones who won't be missed, I have to admit that while I may not entirely believe his story, I believe that he does. With the first 3 gone, you'll be given more freedom as you're given 3 new targets and the ability to tackle them in the order you wish. I chose to head to Jerusalem and take on Majadin, the tyrant left in control of the city while Saladin is off to war. In an interesting twist, he isn't like the others. He claims no noble cause for which he kills these people, offering simply that he did it because he could, and it was fun. Somehow it manages to be no less unsettling than the others you've spoken to, but for once there isn't a moral mystery to unravel, but instead the question of what connects these men. When reporting back to Al-Mualim, he ponders the question to which the master responds that being an assassin, it's only natural to observe these connections and be curious of the solution to the puzzle, but then stating that as an assassin he must resist the urge to question these things. When noting the hypocrisy of the conflicting statements, Mualim spun a web around the topic that Altair couldn't cut through, ending the conversation all while hinting at the answer. For my 5th target, I traveled to Acre in search of the city's regent and William of Montferrat, who had become a tyrant, brutalizing his people and executing prisoners. We learn that King Richard himself will arrive shortly and likely fight with William, which will have him retreat deep into his fortress afterwards. We'll slip in and lay the man down, and he will return to the manner in which others had spoken to you, believing his work to be noble. And again, what he says sounds noble enough. Not stealing food, but keeping it for rationing in the lean times to come. That his harsh punishments had led to a city without crime, and then he hadn't conscripted men to fight but to learn order and discipline. This is probably the most direct ideological battle between the Templars and the Assassins we will see in the game, where they will both want the same thing, peace, safety, and full bellies, but they argue about how to get there. With Templars willing to force a population's submission and provide these things with force, where Assassins would simply provide the tools for success and the freedom to make the right choices, allowing people to fail or succeed on their own. Both ideals are extremes, but I know which I'd prefer with only having the 2 options. In his final words, William will warn us of our good intentions and how they might lead us to a world in ruin, a concerning prophecy. After this, Altair confronts Al-Mualim and finds the connection he was looking for, and that these 9 men are in fact members of the Templar Brotherhood who seek to dominate the world. With his mind put to rest on the issue, at least for the time, we will head to the 6th target. For target number 6, Altair will ride for Damas to kill Abu Nagud, the Merchant King as he is known. Going after the man funding the war effort, and apparently stealing from the people of the city to do so, makes perfect sense, but it's not what I find memorable about the assignment. The man deserved to die, but the manner in which assassins speak to their victims in the moments before their passing, and the kindness they are taught to show, leads to an unexpected level of empathy to a person's failures. When you go to the Merchant King's party, he will display a fountain flowing with wine for his guests and encourage a toast. He will then lecture them about what awful, cruel people they are, and before long, the poisoned wine will take its effect, and he will order his men to kill anyone still alive. This sends us into action, chasing down the man who we will catch before long. In a way, I find myself moved just a bit by the words spoken as he falls his target, a sad man who's known only a life of ridicule.
Be at peace now. Their words can no longer do harm.
Why have you done this?
You stole money from those you claim to lead, sent it away for some unknown purpose. I want to know where it's gone and why.
Look at me. My very nature is an affront to the people I ruled. And these noble robes did little more than to muffle their shouts of hate.
So this is about vengeance, then?
No, not vengeance, but my conscience. How could I finance a war in service to the same god that calls me an abomination?
I shouldn't feel any empathy for a man who just poisoned a building full of people, but somehow I do, and that's saying something. Next, we return to Acre in search of Sibrand, who has become paranoid fearing our arrival. When 6 of your 9 fall, you have to know your time will come soon, and while he's right, he's nearly gone mad with fear, working his men nearly to death in the process. I've got a bone to pick with this assassination. We do our normal investigation, and while we definitely get close enough during the eavesdrop to take a shot at him, I can accept that in canon we would exercise patience and complete gathering intel for a better opportunity, but when we do go to the docks to kill him, I have a serious problem with Altair's lack of will to act. I get it, you want to show how evil this man is and that Altair has learned restraint, but when we're literally feet away from him, watching him murder an innocent, and we just sit there and watch, how is that the best approaching our target? He's vulnerable in this moment, distracted, not surrounded by his men. But no, we wait until he kills this poor man and moves back to the safety of his troops. It seriously irritates me. But as with many others, his final words leave a lasting impact. His fear of death is notable and memorable, but not as much as the revelation that he believes there is nothing waiting for him when he passes. A large revelation coming from a man who fights in the name of God. I refrained from mentioning it earlier, but after our last assignment, Al-Mualim would talk to us more about the Apple of Eden, explaining it to be responsible for many of the biblical miracles such as the parting of the Red Sea and turning water to wine. Sabran says that knowledge of this piece of Eden was the proof he needed to know that there was no God, and that's what made him so fearful. His last words damning, just as so many others we've taken before him.
I followed my orders, believing in my cause. Same as you.
The conversation with Rafik back at the Bureau shows a large shift in Altair's understanding of events, as well as his personal growth. Before this, he had questions, but now there's something more. Doubts. And one's important enough to speak out loud. Take a listen.
Of this and other things.
Is everything all right, my friend? You seem distant.
It's nothing, Rafik. Just a lot on my mind.
Talk to me then. Let me help.
I need to make sense of this myself first. But thank you for the offer.
It is the men you kill, isn't it? You feel something for them.
How?
Ah, my friend. You are not meant to enjoy these grim tasks. Regret, uncertainty, sympathy. This is to be expected.
I should not fear these feelings.
You should embrace them. They are what keep you human.
What if I'm wrong? What if these men are not meant to die? What if they mean well? Misguided, perhaps, but pure in motive.
I am but a Rafik, Altair, and such things are beyond me. Perhaps Al-Mualim can help you to make sense of it.
Yes, perhaps. Thank you, Rafik.
It is my pleasure to have served with one as skilled as you.
Our 8th target and last trip to Damascus is, for me at least, lacking a bit of the ambiguity and morality found in other targets. Jubair al-Hakim is gathering up and burning books he's labeled as dangerous, and there's no story out there where burning books leads to a happy ending, so it makes seeing him as someone to be killed all the easier. The actual mission to assassinate him, however, is a bit more interesting, as your investigation will play, I think, the biggest part in any of the missions you've taken part in. Jubair will be surrounded by followers dressed almost identically to him, but you'll be informed that he will have a pouch around his waist that will mark him as different from the rest. It doesn't seem like too big of a complication, but they will scatter and you'll be forced to view them from afar, which makes it easy to think you have your target when you don't. I almost went after the wrong target more than once while searching for my man, but was satisfied in my efforts when I found him. He tries to die on his high hill, but I found very little sympathy for a man who thinks himself above a person's right to knowledge. With the 8 fallen, we have but one left in our list, in Robert. There's something very different feeling about this last trip to Jerusalem, and that starts with Malik in the den. Where there was once hatred and mistrust, there is now respect between the two men, showing a growth in both of them over the course of our story. Our investigation will go largely the same as the rest, with it revealed that Robert will be attending the funeral of our previous target, Majadin, which will be our time to strike. When reporting our findings to Malik, we will have a last conversation with him, and something I never expected out of Altair: an apology. It's better left to his own words.
Fortune favor your blade, brother.
Malik, before I go, there's something I should say.
Be out with it.
I've been a fool.
Normally I'd make no argument, but what is this? What are you talking about?
All this time, I never told you I was sorry. Too damn proud. You lost your arm because of me. Lost Qadar. You had every right to be angry.
I do not accept your apology.
I understand.
No, you don't. I do not accept your apology because you are not the same man who went with me into Solomon's temple. And so you have nothing to apologize for.
Malik.
Perhaps if I had not been so envious of you, I would not have been so careless myself. I'm just as much to blame.
Don't say such things.
We are one. As we share the glory of our victories, so too should we share the pain of our defeat. In this way, we grow closer. We grow stronger.
Thank you, brother.
Rest if you need to, Altair, that you might be ready for what lies ahead.
The character we started with and the one we just heard really could be considered two different people, and I have to commend the writing team for such a believable evolution, but there's work to be done. We get to the funeral to see someone so obviously not Robert de Sable. I have no idea how anyone, especially a master assassin, falls for it, but whatever. You'll find out we've been duped and that we need to ride for Arsuf in order to stop Robert from convincing King Richard and his crusade to ride on the assassins in Masyaf. I like this mission from a narrative standpoint, but gameplay-wise, it really doesn't fit with the whole theme of the game, especially as we battle our way through Richard's camp on our way to find Robert, but I do find it interesting at least how we get our opportunity, standing before the Crusader King and declaring Robert as to be a traitor. Of course, he disputes the claims, but it is decided that we will fight to prove who's right, with God obviously favoring the one who's victorious. It's not really a fair fight, but I guess either God or being the main character was on our side as we defeat Robert and lay him down to hear his final words, and troubling ones at that, revealing that there wasn't 9 who found the Apple of Eden, but 10, naming Al-Mualim as the last. We have felled 9 Templars as we were tasked to do, but there is another, and with this information we ride back to Masyaf to confront Al-Mualim. What we will find is a brotherhood turned against us as our fellow assassins will fall down upon Altair, forcing him to fight his way through them. Thankfully, Malik learned about the deception during our ride on Robert, and comes to our aid with loyal men by his side, leading a diversion, allowing us to go see our old master. He wields the apple against us, and we'll go through several variations of the fight, none of them particularly interesting from a gameplay standpoint, but cutting down the 9 is neat, I suppose. You'll defeat your mentor and lay him down. His final words that of disbelief in the student defeating the teacher, and the last he heard would be nothing is true, everything is permitted, signaling Altair's full understanding of the creed. That's the end of our story, and while abrupt, I was very happy to find myself in a position of wanting more, craving for the next part of the story in the next game. I said in the beginning, and I'll say it again, it's been so many years since they did it, I forgot a Ubisoft game could be so well written and interesting, spinning a web of intrigue and questions for you to ponder. At the end of the day, everyone you encountered had the same end goal. The only difference would be their method of getting there. The road to hell is paved with good intentions, and it's very possible it's the path every person in the game will end up walking. Overall, the first Assassin's Creed deserves all the praise it got at launch, and while I don't think it's the pinnacle of the series, if you haven't played it in a while, I can recommend it for the narrative alone. There's still quite a bit to talk about when it comes to the series as a whole, but they started strong, and I know from experience it's only going to get better. The gameplay leaves much to be desired, especially in the inconsistency of the targeting and detection systems, but it's a solid base that will be improved on in future titles. Building something this big is a massive undertaking, and it can't be understated how impressive it is to get this much right on the first attempt. It wasn't perfect, but damn it was good, and it leaves me excited to hop into the sequel. I'd like to thank you for starting this journey with me and hope you'll be following along to the end. If all goes well, this video should be out the same time next week as we begin Ezio's story. As always, my outros arrive abruptly and are confusingly short, but that's just how we do it around here. This is Purple signing off. Have a wonderful night, and always remember to smile.
Peace?
I told you. The others I've slain have said as much to me.
That would make them our allies. And yet we killed them.
Make no mistake, we are nothing like these men. Though their goal sounds noble, the means by which they'd achieve it are not. At least, that's what Al-Mualim told me.